Welcome back to the Seven Figure Flipping podcast, where today we're going to tackle analyzing the real estate market mid-year. There are a lot of articles in the news today about what's not good in the U.S. housing market, what's not going well, why people should be scared of it. It's absolutely insane. I'm seeing things that say mortgage rates spike again, home flipping profits are plummeting, and the headlines like, in 39 of 50 of the largest U.S. metro areas, homes are taking longer to sell. Like, of course they're taking longer to sell. Compared to what, though? Let's look at what the real data says. What we're seeing in the housing market today and why it's relevant to people flipping houses, real estate house flipping businesses, is the reality is the housing market in July of 2025 is actually showing signs of normalizing. It's shifting away from extremes, and it's not the best. It's not 2020. It's not 2021, but we're starting to see the pre-pandemic boom get to a state of normalcy. Of course, there's increased inventory compared to 2020, when we literally hit the lowest point of inventory in the entire history of the U.S. housing market. So think about where your reference point is and look at the data. The inventory, there are more homes on the market for sure, but not more than normal. There's a baseline now, not more than last year. It's not rising at a meteoric rate like it was when the interest rates spiked in July of 2022. It took 3 years, but we're seeing it really normalize at this point. Now, every metro is affected differently. The metros that had the biggest growth, the biggest price growth, those are the ones that feel like they're slowing down and prices are coming down the hardest and the fastest. That's because they went up the hardest and the fastest. And if you look at the history over 90 years in the real estate market, that's what you see. Now, of course, there are all kinds of unique market conditions with the Fed fund rate and inflation and things that are completely outside of your control. We don't worry about that stuff because we don't control it. We just watch the data closely. There are price adjustments, which is much needed. It is clear that we have an affordability issue nationwide. Here in my state of Florida, the median price point of a house is $415,000. And we see the first-time homebuyer market being squeezed. There are families who are trying to get their first house ever who simply just can't afford it. They're going to renters, they're living with family, but it's coming down. When you look at the sales data, even the unrealistic sellers are starting to sell their properties. They'll still list them high, but they're selling at 96% of list price instead of 100% or 104% like they had in some of the previous hot years. Higher home prices combined with mortgage rates now hovering between 6 and 7%. It still feels like there's a lot of resistance in the market. But remember, in October of 2023, the interest rates for mortgages hit 8%. And now we're cleanly in the sixes, high sixes, but we're cleanly in the sixes. And we're starting to see that normalize. So inventory, days on market, something you should be watching very closely down to the zip codes in your market. And for you, if you're a house flipper, you should be focusing on realistic pricing. I'll give you an example. A friend of mine, somebody in the seven-figure flipping mastermind, shot me a text yesterday and said, "What would you buy this house for?" Gave me a little bit of information about the property and had a really, really clean exact comp that sold for $296 6 months ago. All I looked at was, what is the rate of price drops that's been happening in this market? Like, how is it declining and what will it be 6 months from now? So it was about 1% a month, and you assume you buy this house and you sell it in 6 months. So you need to take 6% off of that projected value of that house. So I did that. That's the after repair value I came up with. And all I'm thinking here, if I'm a house flipper, and all you should be thinking about, is making sure your numbers are accurate and you have realistic pricing. And when you go to market, price it based on the market, not your profit, not your extended rehab that you paid too much for, went over time on, because the market does not care about that. Now, what's interesting is because it's not just the real estate market that's heavy, it's also the economy that's not as light as it was in 2020 when the government was sending everybody pandemic checks. We're starting to see consumer debt rise, which means people are being squeezed financially. So if you're a real estate business owner, a house flipper, that means the opportunity to help people who may be in financial distress is rising. So that means you're going to have an opportunity to get more houses. However, you have to balance that with sellers' expectations of price and how much money they're looking to get for their house. And that's going to come through practice skills. If you're a real estate house flipper and you have a business and you're doing direct to seller marketing, that means you're doing sales, which means you're talking to sellers, and you need to be very sharp on your skills. Now, the other thing for house flippers is you need to prioritize adding value in your renovations. What are the things that you can do to the property that is not going to cost you an arm and a leg, but it's going to stand out with all the other inventory on the market, since there is more inventory than there has been in the last 4 to 5 years. Okay, this is totally different based on what region you're in, what state you're in, and what county you're in. So some markets, like in the Midwest and the Northeast, are actually having really good performances. We have house flippers in the state of Michigan who are absolutely crushing it. We have house flippers in California who are on the rise and crushing it. So your market is going to drive largely the decisions you make. How is your market transacting? And when we think about this from just a pure business perspective, it's supply and demand. How much demand is out there for buying houses? How much supply is out there? We know supply is up. We know demand is down. That means we have to compete with quality, with location, doing good jobs on our rehabs. We've got to negotiate better deals. But the benefit and the competitive advantage is in today's market, the professionals are succeeding. They're making tons of money, whereas those who aren't taking it as serious and they're amateurs are starting to wash out of the community. And we see this in real time, far less wholesalers, people who are amateurs. Not that wholesalers are amateurs, but a lot of people get into the business because they believe wholesaling is the fast cash, doesn't take any money. So then you end up with thousands of amateurs trying to talk to sellers, negotiating poor prices. And that has died down quite a bit. There's very, very little competition compared to 2021, even early 2022. Okay, and then think about risk as an investor in this market. Think about the size of the rehab or how you are creating an outsized return on your assets. I'll give you some specific examples. The easy one is location. And location is, when you think about location, think about where people actually want to live. Analyze the data in your market by the zip code. Look at the school districts. People with money still want to live in the best places with the best schools for their kids. So location is number one. Number two is look at opportunities to do things that other people are not able to do. So for example, we have an investor in our community who does large rehabs, but adds an entire second story and a pool. And he does it in very specific locations and creates his margin in his business. There are always ways to make money in real estate. It's still the best asset class because it gives you the opportunity for cash flow, depreciation, equity, appreciation, and it lets you use leverage, borrowing other people's money. You can't say that for stocks. You can't say that for so many other things. So in spite of what was an extremely constrained market, the data tells us that it is improving, albeit slightly. And as a result, what we see is the professionals are still doing great in the real estate market who have pivoted or made smart decisions on the assets they're buying. Now, it's never been more true. You win at the buy, meaning you buy at such a deep discount and you get an outsized return. It gives you a lot of room for error and it gives you a lot of room to buy down risk with market adjustments. That should be inspiring for many of you who are getting into the market today as a new investor, and it should be inspiring for those of you who are professionals. I would challenge all of you to sharpen your skills, your rehab skills, your time and budget on your rehabs, your sales skills, your marketing skills, your leadership skills, because the sharper you are as a professional in today's market, the bigger the opportunity there is for you. If you want to talk about sharpening your skills with seven-figure flipping, you guys know there's a link in the comments. As always, feel free to click that. Would love to have a conversation with you. And if you got something out of this podcast, or if you're feeling nervous about the real estate market, go do some research on the data in your market. And if you got something out of this podcast, leave us a 5-star review. It's how, one, I know that you're actually listening. Two, it helps us reach more people who are inspired to get into real estate or to grow their real estate business to something meaningful and serve through the impact they want to make. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you on the next one.